Story 10. I was a waitress many moons ago, and two couples spring to mind. The first were an older couple who were dressed nicely. They were polite and cordial to me, but not overly enthusiastic or friendly. They were at the table for a little over an hour and a half, and we didn't see them say one word to each other during that time. Every time I went over to their table, the atmosphere felt like I'd walked straight into an argument, but they weren't speaking or looking at each other or anything. It very quickly became awkward as fuck. The second couple was meant to be having a proposal dinner. The guy had rung to book a table and had let us know he was going to propose during dessert. He'd given the ring to kitchen staff so we could bring it out with a cake, and he'd got some balloons and streamers too. Anyway, he walks in a couple of steps behind his partner. Everyone has big grins for them both. But he grits his teeth and shakes his head, surreptitiously dragging his finger across his throat pantomime style. Great. Oh, and lucky me, they're seated in my section. It's obvious she was bloody furious with him about something. She spends the first half of the meal seething quietly and the second having a constant pop at him. While she was in the loo, the manager made me double-check he didn't want us to bring the ring out or anything. "Fuck, no," was his response. I felt really bad for him. She really was mean. Story 9. Younger couple came in for what I can only assume was a first date. Ordered a pizza but never ate. Caught up in conversation, I guess. Guy must have been feeling confident BC about 2 hours in. He gets up, goes to the bathroom, and then decides to sit next to her in the booth, rather than across from her where he was before. I swear to you, she then got up and used the restroom about 10 minutes later, and when she came back, decided it would best if they didn't sit next to each other and sat in his original place. Please refrain from doing this. Edit. Feels like I've answered 1,000 times so here. No, there's, in my eyes, nothing wrong with sitting next to your date rather than across. I realize that as long as you're comfortable with it, you can do whatever. Who cares what people think? The awkward part is that he moved next to her and she decided to move to the different side in response. Long story short, please don't make me watch an unnecessary awkward situation. You can always maybe ask if it's cool if you move next to them before you do it. Story 8. Was a server at a popular seafood chain that isn't very fancy, but when you live in a town like the one I worked in, that sort of place is the nicest place to go for Valentine's Day. Well, the night was incredibly busy when a couple came in. They were upset after waiting 45 minutes for a table, and they were complaining quite a lot. The woman was decked out in a super nice dress and faux fur coat that was actually very realistic. Well, she was sat and served her frozen drink. She goes to lift the glass to her mouth, and inexplicably, the bottom of the cup simply breaks and the drink is spilled, all over her dress and nice coat. Was unfortunate. Story 7. Busboy on Las Vegas Strip, an attempted proposal. Dude tries to set up sign with GF's friends for her to show up and see the ring near a fountain. Duck stole the ring. They found it 2 hours later as he dropped in the fountain. She still said yes. Free drinks were given. Story 6. Happened to my poor coworker. A guy and his date came in for Valentine's Day. They had a great time, ate a lot of food, drank a lot of wine, and got along really well with my coworker who was their server. About 2 months later, they come back in and request my coworker again, who happily says yes to serving them. He goes up and greets them, the guy introduces his wife to him, and my coworker mentions something about how much he enjoyed serving them on Valentine's Day. They go quiet. Wife gets up and leaves, guy just lowers his head. Turns out he had brought his mistress in on Valentine's Day, but my coworker didn't realize he was with a different woman this time around, so didn't think anything of it. We never saw the guy again. Story 5. Back when I served food at one of those super touristy seafood restaurants, I worked a Valentine's Day double shift. For lunch, this younger couple came in celebrating their 1-year anniversary. I offer my congratulations and proceed to do my usual spiel before taking orders. The girl is looking more and more dismayed the longer I talk. Finally, I get to the end and ask if there are any allergies. She looks directly at her boyfriend and states, "Yes, I'm allergic to fish and shellfish." Then looks over at me very sad. I made sure every aspect of her meal was fine for her. But it was that look of, we've been dating a year, and he still takes me to a restaurant that could kill me. That really did it for me. Story 4. It was like a movie. I was bartending at an Italian restaurant, not a fancy one, but still, and it's pretty much full of Valentine's dates. A guy walks in and sits at the bar by himself, looking pretty down. He asked for a whiskey, so I poured it. Told him it was on the house because he looked like he needed it. He proceeds to tell me his story. He had come to the city to surprise his girlfriend for Valentine's, about a 5-hour bus trip between cities, and he sure surprised her. She was in her dorm room fucking one of his friends from high school. He didn't know what to do, so he just walked into the first place that sold alcohol. I spilled as much whiskey as he wanted and watched the Raptors with him. Never saw him again. It's cliché, but it happened. Story 3. I was working as a waitress in a sushi restaurant, and Valentine's Day was an all-hands-on-deck shift. This guy I had just started seeing wanted to go out, but I told him that working in food service, you never get Valentine's Day off, and we'd just have to celebrate the day after or the weekend after. Nope. He got so upset that he went and asked a different girl out, came to the restaurant I worked at on V-Day and sat in my section. He then proceeded to spend the entire evening making a fool out of himself and making his date uncomfortable as he tried to make me jealous. Needless to say, we didn't go out again. Ever. Story 2. Not a total disaster, but still not good. Had a table of 2 people, probably in their mid-40s last year. Took 45 minutes for this couple to get their entrees due to our kitchen being way too slammed. When they were dropped at the table, they immediately asked for to-go boxes because they told their babysitter they'd be home by a certain time. I overheard the wife say, "Well, I guess this is why we don't celebrate Valentine's Day." The worst part was that they weren't angry, just very sad. My personal feelings about dining out on Valentine's Day aside, I felt so horrible that this couple clearly had put in an effort to have a nice night with each other only to have it go that way. We comped their meals, BTW. Edit to clear up some timing issues. I should have added more context to this the first time, but wanted to keep it simple. They made a reservation, but unfortunately got seated about 10 minutes late. They ordered a round of drinks while looking over the menu, then a salad course, and then entrees. So at the point their entrees arrived, they had already been in the restaurant for close to an hour and a half. Story 1. I am a bartender but happen to be the one on the date for this particular disaster. So anyone in the service industry knows, you generally just do not make plans on certain holidays because you will have to work, no matter what. I had not had a date on Valentine's in probably 7 years, so when my boss gave me the day off, I was surprised and posted something dumb on Insta about it. I got a DM from a girl I knew but not very well, asking me out for Valentine's, and she was way cute, so I figured why the fuck not. Things went so wrong so quickly. We get to the restaurant, grab a drink in the bar while we wait on our table, took a shot to get the social lubricant flowing since we don't really know each other very well. I pay our bar tab, and we move to the table. To set the scene a bit, this place is a really nice steakhouse, and they have these dark red diamond pattern booths that are fluffy, with buttons at each point of the pattern. The moment we sit down, my date lets out a blood-curdling scream like she had just been stabbed. She grabs her arm, and her hand comes away covered in blood, and she looks so confused, and I have no idea what the fuck just happened. I look around thinking someone just stabbed her, but everyone around us is seated just staring over at us. I move over to her side of the booth and grab the napkins off the table to find where she is cut. The entire back of her upper arm is sliced from elbow to shoulder. One of the buttons had broken off of the wall and the snapped metal fastener was exposed, so when she sat down, her arm ran all the way down along it. She is panicking. I am trying to stop the bleeding, while the people around us figure out what is going on and call 911 for us. The manager comes over and is immediately a defensive asshole until he sees that it was his booth that did the damage. The paramedics show up, I get the owner's info from the manager, and we spend the night in the ER where she needed something like 80 stitches. We both are exhausted at this point, when a guy walks in with flowers, champagne, and a bag of takeout food from the restaurant we had left. It was the owner of the restaurant coming to make sure we could have the Valentine's meal we had missed out on. Sure, it was probably because he was afraid to get sued, but it was still really welcomed after how shitty the night had become, so quickly. She and I ended up dating for almost 3 years and became good friends with the owner. Such good friends she ended up banging him, and that was the last I heard from either of them. Woo, Valentines. I have stuck to working those nights ever since. The end. Edit. I would like to sincerely thank the people going through my comment history and messaging me things like, maybe if you didn't play so many video games like a man-child, then you wouldn't get cucked. You guys are making my fucking night, and it is hilarious. How dare people enjoy things? Story 10. I set my hair on fire and spilled a full Stella on a lady. I work in a causal fine dining steakhouse. Luckily for me, the lady I spilled the Stella on was super understanding, and her husband said from across the table, "Well, now she has to take her pants off." So, that could have gone worse for me. Story 9. I was the manager of a wings and pizza place with a full bar. Definitely not the kind of place you'd take someone for a romantic Valentine's Day dinner. But it was still busy because some people aren't very tactful. We had a guy who had called ahead and asked if we could put a ring in a dessert for him, and of course, we obliged. He dropped the ring off the day ahead, and I put it in the safe in our office to keep it secure. Fast forward to Valentine's Day. The couple shows up and they're so obviously in love that she didn't seem to notice or care about the fact that he had brought her to a middle-of-the-road place with a sports bar atmosphere on the most romantic day of the year. They ordered champagne, well, the local winery's best sparkling white, entrees, and it was almost time for dessert. I had used my chef skills to whip up a special chocolate strawberry tart that wasn't on the menu just for this occasion, because why not try to make their night at least a little fancy? I went to the safe to get the ring, and it wasn't there. I was freaking out big time. I asked everyone there if they knew what the fuck had happened to it. My assistant manager on site had no idea, so I called my other assistant, who also had the safe code, and they didn't know either. Finally, my bar manager mentioned that one of the owners had been in earlier and spent a little time in the office, so at my wit's end, I called the owner. It turns out that he had seen the ring in the safe, and thought it was something a customer had left behind. Figuring that he had come into an extremely lucky situation, he decided, like the scumbag he was, that he'd take it for himself and save money on a gift for his wife on Valentine's. So, I asked the server and bar manager to help stall the couple. The server told them that we were going to do something special for their big date, and to hold tight. I ran out, hopped in my car, and rushed to get the ring from the owner's house, because he was, as I had mentioned, a scumbag, and didn't want to be bothered with bringing the ring to the restaurant himself. The bar manager went over to the table and did some complicated table-side cocktail mix that had a bunch of flair bartending tricks and ended with a flaming shot that, once dropped into the rest, made it smoke. I was really disappointed when I heard about all of this because I would have loved to see it instead of breaking a ton of traffic laws on my quest to get the ring. Finally, I rushed back in after about 15 minutes of being on the brink of a heart attack, placed the ring on the dessert, and had their server take it out. At that point, just about the entire staff was watching the table, and when we saw the look on her face, my heart finally started beating again. She said, "Yes," and I started looking for someone else to work for the very next day. Story 8. 16 years in hospitality gives you some good stories. The most awkward. My first job as a waitress, a guy wanted to propose to his girlfriend. He came in 2 months before to book and had everything figured out. He planned to pop the question during dessert. We had champagne, balloons, and sparklers prepped for the big moment. The time comes, he drops to one knee, gives a speech about his love for her. He asks. She says no, puts the ring in her bag, finishes her dessert, and leaves. Quite possibly the most awkward thing I have had to witness, alongside around 200 other people. The manager gave him everything for free. He felt that bad for him. Cringed inside every time I saw him after that. The most fucked up. I was working as a duty manager, and one of the tills kept dropping off the network. As I was trying to fix it, I could clearly hear the conversation of the table by the waiter's station. It started out sweet enough with her excitedly telling him she was pregnant. He went quiet and didn't say anything for a bit, and then asked her what the plan was. She said she was keeping the baby. He said he didn't want kids, and had told her this. She got upset and said she thought he'd be happy and change his mind when he found out. By this point, I've fixed the till, but am unable to step away from this car crash. Turns out she stopped taking the pill without telling him, thinking she could turn him around. He said he knew she could be a little nuts sometimes, but this was next level. He told her it was over, and she could send someone to collect her things as he wanted nothing more to do with her. He called me over to pay the bill and just left. The guy never even shouted. He just calmly went "fuck this" and noped out of there. I couldn't even look her in the eye, just left her to leave in her own time. The funniest, managing hotel room service where there was a Valentine's package that included getting each course of the special menu delivered to your room. More than a few couples thought it was a good idea to call for the next course and then start having sex. having to help with deliveries as reception fucked up the bookings. I had the privilege of people answering the door naked, seeing sex toys strewn around, and one where the other members of the threesome were carrying on in the background. After complaints of similar instances from my team, I had to take action. I ended up having to call the offending guests and tell them if they could not respect my team by answering the door in at least a closed dressing gown, they could come down and collect the rest of their meal from the restaurant. Bonus from the same night, had to call an ambulance for a woman with a dislocated shoulder. The guy admitted that they were trying to recreate a bukkake-type scene in the shower using conditioner as the cum. He slipped in the conditioner and fell on her. Story 7. Depends on who you ask as to whether or not this is a disaster. Place I worked at in college was a pretty nice establishment and a romantic destination because our view overlooked the entire city. It was also located at the top of a 5-star hotel that had several projectors cycling through what was going on around the hotel in the lobby. There was no footage from the gym or pool, so it was relatively tame and never a privacy issue. Best you'd ever get were people eating, walking around the lobby, or drinking at the bar. Anyway, guy walks in with his wife and asked to be seated in a secluded area. Well, you can imagine since it's busy, and Valentine's Day we didn't have those, so he basically waited an extra hour to make sure he was seated in the back corner. It's my section. I take their drink order and take care of them. Though the husband was gone when I returned, and I didn't see him go to the bathroom. Thinking nothing of it, I go to the bar to get the drink and see all of my coworkers huddled around the monitor above the bar along with everyone else in there. Sure enough, I found the husband as he was underneath the table going down on his wife. Only problem was the camera above their table had a clear view because it was situated in the corner. So now the entire hotel lobby can see as it cycles between us in the bar laughing, people checking in, and our romantic couple dining on each other. More and more people start to notice and the bar fills up. This includes back-of-the-house staff like dishwashers and the line cooks. Eventually it also brings out my manager who runs over to their table, tells them what happened, and they both run out mortified. But before they do, the husband tries to stand up too quickly and flips the table, ruining all the plates while also exposing that his fly was down and his dick is out. He's yelling at my manager, the hotel manager, who came up when he saw it in the lobby. And security unzipped as he's escorted out. So yes, disaster for them, but man, they made a lot of people laugh that night. Story 6. In college I waited tables and Valentine's Day was always a good one in terms of tips. I once saw a couple come in to eat. Halfway through the dinner, the man's wife shows up to surprise the couple. The wife took the wine bottle and poured the remnants on the husband's head, took off her ring and told the girlfriend she could have him. He tipped me a $100. Story 5. Old man proposed to old woman. He tried to get off the chair to kneel, tripped and fell, and I assume broke something since he couldn't get back up and we had to call an ambulance. My manager had to drive her teeth to the hospital separately because she had taken them out to eat her soup, Lord knows why, and left them on the table in the confusion. Edited to add, I don't know if she said yes, my manager didn't get to see them at the hospital, only pass on her teeth to the nurse. Story 4. I was working for a higher-end chain steakhouse in the northwest corner of Greater Los Angeles, in the Valley. Valentine's is obviously one of the top 5 busiest days of the year for us. We did about 500 covers between 5 and 10 p.m. It's also a restaurant with a very open concept floor plan. Booths along the 4 walls of the restaurant, and an array of tables in the middle with no partitions or anything between them. A younger couple, maybe mid-20s, dressed to the nines, came in shortly after we opened and were seated in a table basically in the dead center of the dining room. They were very friendly and pleasant, and I could tell that for them, dining at our restaurant was a really special treat, so I did everything in my power to make it special for them. When they're done, probably around 7, I brought their check, which was around $300. When I came back to pick it up, the guy had a super embarrassed look on his face and he said he thinks he left his wallet in the car, and the woman, who was embarrassed for him, doesn't have anything with her because her dress had no pockets and she didn't bring a purse. So he goes out and 5 minutes later comes back in looking pale as a ghost. He has left his wallet at home and asks if he can call back later with payment info. My GM won't let this fly because there's no collateral of any sort he can leave, so the guy has to drive home to Burbank to get his wallet while the woman waits, with her hair done, and her red lipstick and her pretty dress, in the middle of the dining room on Valentine's Day. Now, on the best day with no traffic, never happens, it's at least 40 minutes each way from our restaurant to Burbank. She was there for almost 2 hours waiting for this guy. We were all so embarrassed for her that the staff kept discreetly slipping her drinks and little amuse-bouche bites from the kitchen. It was one of the most awkward things I've ever seen in a restaurant. When he finally got back, he was super apologetic to us and to her. He paid the check and tipped like 30%, and they left. It was pretty obvious it was an honest mistake, but I still think about that couple from time to time and wonder how things worked out for them. Posting this from my phone, so apologies for any typos or formatting problems. Story 3. A couple sitting at the bar were enjoying their night out. The man got up from his bar stool and left for the bathroom. As his girlfriend was alone, and absolutely wasted, at the bar, a random woman approached and revealed that she recently matched with the woman's boyfriend on Tinder and had hooked up a week earlier. The drunk girlfriend refused to believe this story, so the woman showed her his Tinder profile and their conversation. The boyfriend returned to a drunk, sobbing and screaming girlfriend. I felt like I was watching a reality TV show. It was incredible. The poor girl was basically carried out of the bar by her boyfriend of 3 years, whom she just discovered has been cheating on her for who knows how long. It was the most dramatic moment I have ever experienced, and it was absolutely none of my business. Edit. I was a barback at the time, and this couple sat directly in front of the place I spend most of my time, the glass washing station. Edit 2. For those wondering how the woman knew the couple was in a long-term relationship, I really don't know. My guess is she figured it out the same way I did, based on listening, body language, and the fact that this woman was overly touchy and liberal with cheek kisses and such. It was fairly obvious. Regardless, she approached out of concern and curiosity, and she succeeded in outing the guy, which resulted in a very upsetting scene. Story 2. Not a waiter, but I was a pastry chef at this big resort in Cape Cod. We got a special order from this guy who was coming in for his anniversary, Valentine's Day. He wanted his dessert to have, "Will you marry me?" written on it so he could pop the question when it came out. He called ahead to the front and back kitchen, even came in himself that morning to make sure it was good to go. The whole crew was behind him. We had cooks all night coming in the ask if it had happened yet. I wrote the inscription on the plate and dressed it to the nines with gold leaf and expensive chocolate. I'm taking a picture of the plate just before it's set to go out and notice our head waiter come in with a weird look on his face. He says plainly, "They don't need it." She broke up with him before the entrees hit the table. Story 1. I worked at a pretty high-end Mediterranean bistro. My second Valentine's there, it was probably the busiest night I've ever worked as a server. We had reservations that booked basically the entire restaurant, including the bar and patio, from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. No walk-ins were to be seated unless a reservation was canceled, or someone with a reservation didn't show up. Most of the customers were pretty understanding and either waited or simply left. One dude, however, kept pushing and pushing, asking every 10 minutes how much longer until he is seated, constantly saying how he is a regular customer and how his date is going to be there at 7. He got there at 6. We insisted that once a table was available and all the customers before him were seated, he would get a table, but because the amount of reservations we couldn't guarantee, he would even get a table at all. At about 6:50, the guy loses it, fast walks up to the hostess stand where the reservation book is, grabs the reservation book and practically runs out the front door. Now everything is going to complete shit because the only copy of the reservations for the night that is barely half over is gone. 2 of the owners ran outside to follow the guy and try and get the book back, but by the time they got out, he had already left the parking lot. Even better is, 2 hours later, chaos is still running rampant, and the dude shows back up saying he has a reservation for 2. 3 of the 5 of the owners, all brothers, escorted the dude and his date out to the parking lot and banned him from the restaurant permanently. They even took a picture of him and posted it in the window saying, "Do not serve this man. TLDR salty dude without reservation steals reservation book and then tries to come back later." Edit. If anyone wants to use this for a sitcom, feel free. Just let me reprise my role as the waiter and we can call it even.